smokes, I'm no joke out the bullpen. Bringing nothing but heat, leave you hanging like clothespins. He's a beast when he goes in, ice cold frozen. The first round draft pick, number one chosen. Drop bombs, explosion, self-promotion. And I keep shit moving like a flanker in motion. I'm the number one spokesman, it's my devotion. That I'm dedicated to the rhyme is my own notion. Brown water's the potion, it put hair on your chest. Or you can put one in the air and it'll put you to rest. Sweet dreams, I'm about to fade. I got my mind on my money and I'm dreaming about getting this all paid. Mr. Go-Getter, Mr. Assertive, Mr. Initiative, Mr. Results, man, I'm all about my business, kid. Damn.
All about business on a suddenly not so casual Thirsty Thursday. It is September 14th, 2023. It is the Shark. It is the Gun. 2 plays, 2 games, college and NFL. Not waiting around. Guns picks. What's going on tonight, my brother?
It's another beautiful Thursday. Listen, we killed it in week 1. We're going to kill it in week 2. I was 5-3. Going absolutely electric on the primetime games. I think I'm 5-0 on primetime games. You followed me in the Slack. We actually went 7-3. So we're absolutely making money, making bank. We're going to do it once again in week 2. 4-1 on the Circa plays as well. Let's do it. I'm ready for Thursday night football. Minnesota and the Eagles.
Not waiting around. Lincoln Financial Field, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, down on Broad Street. The Birds come home off a real lackluster one up in Foxborough against an elite defensive squad, and the Patriots catching a rematch from last year early season against a Vikings team who we do not like in any capacity. Guns, let's talk about the total first. First official of the broadcast expecting upward movement in points off of a crazy one last year. Talk to me on this one.
Yeah, when we're looking at this one, I basically just wanted to look at the box scores, not only just from week 1, but I also wanted to look at the box score from the Philly game versus Minnesota on Monday Night Football in week 2. Similar situation that we saw last year as well. You have looking at Philly last week. Let's talk about every single drive that they had for the offense in this one. First possession, they had a 56-yard drive and a field goal versus New England, of course. Interception for a TD. First possession, which was an INT. It was a defensive touchdown, 70 yards by Slay. Slaying once again, he slayed in the game versus Minnesota as well. Second possession, obtained a fumble, and they scored a TD. So you have 17 points, well, essentially 16 points because they missed one of the extra points in those possessions. And they went off in 3 to 7 possessions, punts, 3 consecutive field goals. New England had 3 turnovers on downs, pick 6 and a fumble in the second half, and they only lost by a very little bit. But let's talk about Minnesota. 11 possessions. Here's what the possessions were in the game versus Tampa last week. Punt, fumble, and that was in Tampa territory. Fumble, punt, touchdown, field goal, punt, INT in Tampa territory, TD, punt, punt. So basically you have this Minnesota team that can get into scoring position, but they're getting 0 points. And that's what happened last year in the game versus Philly. Talking about the drives on this one from last year's game, Philly had all their points in the first half, and so did Minnesota. They had 24-7 was the end of the first half. Then you look at the second half, Philly didn't even cross the 50. They had a blocked punt, 2 blocked field goal, 2 punts, and an INT. And then you look at Minnesota. Minnesota basically controlled the time of possession. They controlled the yardage in the second half. 4 out of their 5 drives, 3 were in the red zone, and the outcome was 3 INTs, and they ended the game at the Philly 11 driving 12 plays, 71 yards, 0 points. So what I'm trying to show you here is I'm trying to give you a picture of the total. There was plenty of opportunities in not only last week's game versus Tampa, but also in this game here that they could have scored points, and I don't think they're going to leave those on the table in this spot, especially when you had 2 offenses that kind of played below their pay grade last year. Also, look at what Minnesota did as a road dog, non-conference last season. Actually, just overall together. They had 4 spots where they were a road dog last season at Buffalo, 33-30 in OT. One of the most flukiest games I've ever seen in my life. 4th and 12. Jefferson makes a great catch. They stop him at the goal line, fumble. It was just everything was just all on Minnesota's luck side. That was the over. Then you had Green Bay 41-17, 3.5-point dogs. That was an over. Detroit 34-23 in a revenge spot at Detroit, 2.5-point road dogs. That hit the over. The only over that didn't hit was week 2, Philly 24-7. They did get the over in the first half. No points were scored in the second half. But what I'm telling you is points should have been scored in the second half, at least on the Minnesota side. 3 out of the 4 games on the road as a road dog, Minnesota goes over. I think this is going to be a different position here from a points perspective. I do lean on the Philly side on this one. The line correlation makes sense in this one, and I think Shark will get to that in a second. But I look at this more from the total. It's the same exact total that we had last year. I like the over 49 on this spot just based on the history, and this is just one of those spots where I think there's going to be a little bit of get right for both sides of the offense. So give me the over here, 49, 2-unit special.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, a get right for both offenses. Obviously, last week we did handicap the game correctly, taking Tampa Bay on the road, and we had suggested that Philadelphia game in New England would be a coin flip against the spread. And that's where I want to open up this conversation as we are taking Philadelphia at -6.5, 1-unit official. And you go back to last week, as I mentioned, neither team was very impressive. So theoretically, one of the two needs to improve. And where I find something very interesting in terms of pattern recognition, go back to last year. Philadelphia opened up last year out of the division on the road at Detroit on a very similar figure to last week's -4. Last year, they were -4.5, 4, or 3.5 at Detroit. And the game developed very similarly to how that New England game did develop last weekend. Philadelphia got an early lead, largely aided by a pick 6 in the first half, and then they proceeded to melt off the game, and the final result was a hook on the ATS side. And then you go back to last year, same exact thing. Home game 1 at the Link, primetime game against Minnesota. And this is where the line starts to tell us a very, very strong Philadelphia story. I went back and I was actually surprised. In week 2 last year, the Eagles were only favored at open -2 against Minnesota. And it reminded me that the Eagles last year, truthfully, were not expected to go to the Super Bowl. They were an upstart team. They had a new coach, young guy, good morale. Jalen Hurts obviously showing upside, but it all improved for them very quickly and very, very powerfully, if you want to call it that. Minnesota also had a great campaign last year, but Minnesota is coming the other direction, and that's why this line is telling you such a heavy story for Philadelphia. We talk about this all the time, and it is highly, highly important. -2 last year in week 2, blowout win 24-7, revenge game for Minnesota. They're not holding the line in the same environment. They're not moving it towards Minnesota at all. This is a 13-4 Minnesota team last year that people still love. No, they're moving this the other direction. -7 Philly. This is a big-time Philly line, a championship line. And you really go through Philly at home outside of the division last year. When Jalen Hurts played, there was one isolated game late season. He was hurt, and Gardner Minshew did lose outright to New Orleans. When Hurts played, 5-0 ATS regular season and 1-0 ATS playoffs against San Francisco. You go to the Minnesota side of this conversation. Obviously, Guns discussed just how poor they've been on the road as an underdog, and the totals speaking to a lack of defensive quality. Outside of the division last year, they were 2-1-1 ATS. We've been talking about this dating back to the preseason last week, and we'll continue it now. The level of fool's gold of this team. They did get hammered, as we mentioned, at Philadelphia. They come out very poorly in these games. They were down 24-7 at the half. They did win a game at Washington, 20-17. It was a push. They were favored -3. Key point there, they were down 17-7 in the fourth quarter before a flurry comeback to push that game. And the most egregious of all of them at Buffalo. This is a game that Buffalo did what Buffalo continues to do, turn the ball over in historically disrespectful fashion, where this team, Buffalo, so talented yet so undisciplined, effectively gave the Vikings the game. The Bills were up 27-10 in the third quarter in complete, utter control. And somehow a cluster of turnovers ended up with Minnesota winning the game 33-30. It was on NFL highlights, NFL films, NFL's greatest games. I saw it this summer. It was pure insanity. But the moral of the story is it wasn't so much the Vikings were that great as to Buffalo being that poor managing leads in the second half. And one final point in this game, which is absolutely integral, dating back to last year, including a playoff loss at home to the Giants, the Vikings have played this division 5 times. They are 0-4-1 ATS against the NFC East dating back to last year. I think that speaks directly to the parity and I would say mediocrity of the NFC North. And I would say it speaks to the strength and high level of quality and depth to the NFC East. Giants, Cowboys, Eagles, and Commanders. This division has hammered the Vikings. And as you saw last year, 40-3 home loss to Dallas, margin loss to the Eagles on the road, home playoff loss to the Giants, home regular season non-cover to the Giants, and a push at Washington that I mentioned where they were down 10 points in the fourth quarter. This is not where they compete well. Kirk Cousins is historically awful in prime time. Numbers and narratives all over it. Bird Gang, stand up at home. Big time home game 1, September the 14th, Thursday evening, -6.5, 1 unit official. Switching over to college football, 2 games on the card tonight. Not a lot going on. Guns Picks has an official. We bought the Memphis Tigers correctly last week against Arkansas State. This is a yearly repeating game, not an outlier game as much as last week appeared to be. But playing Navy did hammer them last year on the road in Annapolis. Now come home to Memphis. Strong figure, Guns Picks, -13.5 official.
Yeah, I got to be on Memphis in this one. If you know anything about them, when they play Navy at home, they historically own this team. So when you look at Navy, they started the year 1-1, coming off a 24-0 victory. And if you remember, they took a week off. They were at Dublin, Ireland, to go play my Irish, getting smoked in that regard. They're trying to change the offensive scheme around, trying to get a little bit away from the triple option. Is still, of course, their main source of production on the offensive side. But I know they're trying to get the pass game going on this one. But looking at Memphis, they can beat you in the run game. They can beat you in the pass game. They have an electric offense. 470 yards of total offense this season, 179 on the ground, 291 on average in the passing game. Navy, of course, wants to run the ball. Like I said before, triple option. So far this season, they only averaged 2.6 yards per carry versus Notre Dame and 5.6 yards per carry versus Wagner. Wagner, of course, FCS. But when you look at this Memphis team, they see the option every single season. They know how to stop the run. They're holding their opponents to 2.1 yards per carry this season, 3.5 yards per carry in 2022, if you want to see the difference between last year and this year. So they're actually improving a little bit on the defensive side. Granted, it's only 2 weeks in the season. Take that with a grain of salt. I just think that this defense for Memphis is just loaded, especially on the defensive line. They just went to the transfer portal and they got 300-pound linemen to stuff that run. Transfers that are coming over from schools that, I don't know, Ohio State, Oklahoma. Do those teams ring a bell? Yeah, so they got some real solid talent on the defensive side. They need to improve there, and they did. Navy, of course, lost 4 straight versus Memphis. They're 1-3 against the spread in the last 4, including a 37-13 loss last season as 5-point dogs. Now you're seeing the line flip into a massive 14.5, 14, 13.5. I even saw some 13s that are out there now. So it's a big line jump from year 1 to year 2. Granted, I know Navy has a little bit of a turnover as far as the coaching staff is concerned. I think that is still going to be a progression for Navy, and it's too early to be playing this Memphis team. Transitional year for Navy, new head coach, struggles on both sides of the ball. Memphis, massive upgrades. Offense is going to be clicking, a lot of returning starters, including their starting quarterback, and a lot of weapons for them. But the defense has gotten much better. So this is a very dangerous Memphis team, and they're going into Memphis, this Navy team, on a Thursday night. It's all Memphis, baby. I love them here. Give me Memphis 13.5, 2-unit special.
Yeah, I like that play as well. I'm not playing it officially, but I do think that is the correct side of this game. The number is all over it. As Guns mentioned, this is a heavy line. It is for good reason. I just want to talk to a couple guys in the chat here. Our guy Coin, C-O-I-N. We see you says down to 11.5. I'm not sure what book that is. Please type that in the chat, what book you're looking at there. Jay's final take. Thoughts on the first half under? I will say this. I just looked at it. I think the under is the correct side. Numerically, we talk about this all the time. The splits are telling you a game flow expectancy and a points expectancy per half as a relative point against each other. The total in this game did open at 48.5 and is getting steamed down. But I think very importantly, the first half over did open at 23.5. So if you just do some simple math, 23.5 is short of 48.5 if you just do a ×2 multiplication. And I'm seeing this at a juiced point for the over at minus 120, 23.5, which is, again, where they're trying to bait bettors to think they're going to get a cheap price on the overpaying for a short line. And this is telling you a very, very intelligent numerical story to the first half under there. So, again, I'm not playing this game. We're going to be out here tomorrow night with all the weekend officials in college football, but just wanted to address that. It is definitely a first half underline number as a proportion to the full game. So just wanted to address that. And the guys always bring us conversation in the chat. We see our guy Detroit Gator, Woodford Reserve has entered the chat. Cheers up, fears down. Coach E out on the West Coast hanging out. Good talk last night, my guy. Appreciate you immensely. Rocco Franchetti Jr. What's up, brother? We appreciate you, man. Big time energy. And we are wrapping it up on that. 2 games, 3 top plays, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the way we got of the water. My official, taking the Bird Gang at home, minus 6.5, 1 unit. Guns Picks is on the over, 49. Fully discussed to open the broadcast. And college football tonight on a Suddenly Not So Casual Thirsty Thursday. Guns Picks, Memphis, minus 13.5, 1 unit official. Appreciate you guys so much. Subscribe to the brand new Sharky Waters Nation YouTube channel. We'll be on here tomorrow night, right about the same time, 7 p.m. for week 3 CFB Knowledge for College, the Shark and the Gun. Top energy, top vibes, top conversation, and top level of analysis. We love to do it. Love to bring you guys the energy and the picks. Guns Picks. Love working with you. You are the man. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Yeah, I'm seeing the lines here. Actually, I want to go back to that Memphis game. 11.5, 12s I'm seeing out there. This thing's dropping, so I got to go and check, see what the hell happened. And that's college football for you. The lines can drop in a drop of a hat, especially 10 minutes before game time. Maybe someone got ruled out, and that's changing the line. I'll have to go check on that one myself. But anyways, let's go. Let's talk about what's going on with the channel this weekend. We got the Friday show, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be Shark and the Gun college football preview. You're going to be joining that one. Knowledge for College. We're going to be absolutely electric. Plays off the chain. I know Shark is killing it, and I am on a cold streak, and I'm about to turn that shit around this week. But on the NFL, man, we're cooking. Circa Million show coming live on Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go check us out there. Hit the notification, hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe to the Sharky Waters Nation channel so you will see all the content that comes here. And also, it is going to be Coffee with the Gun Saturday mornings. Join me 10 a.m. before the games tip off. I will stay on with you for an hour. You bring the questions, I bring the comments and the insight, and we will have ourselves a Saturday, folks. And I'll bring the bourbon too. I know Gator loves the Woodford himself. I will be there for that. But thanks for joining us here for the Thursday edition of the Circa Million Show. Let's dominate the board. Let's go Birds. Let's get that over. Let's cash some tickets. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang.